There are a lot of Beatles spots in London, and I'm going to take you to all of them. Some of them that you know, and some you don't.
Although the Beatles are from Liverpool, their footprints are all over London. And the best way to tell the Beatles' story is to visit the sites in London that they made famous. So whether you're a fan of the Fab Four or you just enjoy visiting famous sites, I guarantee you'll get something out of this video. Check the description for a link to a map to all the sites we'll visit.
So let's start where it all began. Behind me is the English National Opera, but it used to be the home of Decca Records.
This key site is where manager Brian Epstein set up the Beatles' 1962 audition in hopes of procuring a record contract. The execs at Decca famously rejected the Beatles, saying the guitar music was on its way out.
Undeterred, Epstein took the recordings from the Decca audition and took them here to the HMV shop to get them transferred to vinyl.
Jim Foy, the man who worked on the transfer, suggested Epstein play the music for George Martin at Parlophone. After listening, Martin offered a recording contract to Epstein and the Beatles.
And that forever cemented Decca's place in the Hall of Fame of stupid rock decisions. This is St. John's Wood Station. It's one of the best looking train stations on the whole tube line. Plus there's a Beatles coffee shop over there that should give you a hint that there's some pretty amazing Beatles sites here in this part of London.
Parlophone had a pretty famous studio in St. John's Wood. I'm sure you've heard of it. Although the magic happened inside the studio, the attraction is outside.
When you come here, you might assume that Ian McCullin, the photographer, took the famous picture from that monument. But he actually had to set up a ladder in the middle of the road, and he only had time to take 7 shots, and I think we'll agree he nailed it.
This is a popular tourist attraction for young and old all times of the year, but be aware of one thing.
When you come here, please be careful. This is a residential road, and although the residents accept the fact that it's a tourist area and there's going to be people crossing the road, it is still fairly dangerous, so take precaution. If you're looking for a little souvenir, I can't think of a better thing for the man cave than this. But I think the city of London is a little ahead of us because this thing isn't going anywhere.
But just walk a little past the studio and right next door is the excellent Abbey Road shop.
There's a few Beatles souvenir stores scattered about London. Don't make the mistake of going to those cheap ones, especially the one on Baker Street. This one, Abbey Road Studios, is where you should buy your Beatles souvenirs.
This store is truly excellent. They've got everything from t-shirts to toys to record albums.
Make sure you bring your pen so you can write something on the wall. They paint it over every 3 months or so, but you can get your message out there. I think one of the great Beatles mysteries is where did the back cover of Abbey Road take place? You see a brick wall with the really cool tiled letters. I live near Abbey Road and I've walked its entire length and I've never seen that wall. Well, I did a little diligence, a little research, and this is where it was. This is the Alexandra Estate. The wall used to be right outside the estate. The photo for the album was taken in 1969. This place went up in 1972, and of course they took down everything around it. So you will never actually see that wall, but you can visit the spot on the end of Abbey Road where it was taken.
Before you leave St. John's Wood, there's one more stop that you really should make.
This is 7 Cavendish Avenue, home of Paul McCartney. He purchased this home for just £250,000. He wanted a place that was close to Abbey Road Studios so he could get there quickly.
Though he is spotted around town on occasion, he's probably not going to answer the door, so you might as well not try ringing him. Of course, Paul didn't always live in St. John's Wood.
Now, any worthwhile Beatles tour is going to take you to Savile Road, to the rooftop concert site, or to Abbey Road. But how many will take you here?
When they left Liverpool for London, the boys needed a place to stay. 57 Green Street, Flat L, is the only place in London where all 4 Beatles lived in the same place at the same time. When I was filming, even people from the neighborhood didn't know this. So there's your star-struck hidden gem.
If you're going to do a real Beatles tour, you got to hit all the spots, and one of them is right here in Marylebone. There are 3 spots, including right here at Marylebone Station, where the opening of Hard Day's Night was filmed.
Not too far away, you'll find a blue plaque at our second Marylebone spot.
This is 34 Montague Square, and as you can see, there's a John Lennon plaque on this building. This is where John and Yoko lived. Not just that, it was Ringo's flat, and he lent it out to them. And not only that, this is where John in 1968 was the victim of that famous drug bust, and there's a picture of him walking down these stairs as he's getting arrested. But also, this is the flat where John and Yoko's very controversial Double Virgins album was shot.
Speaking of album covers, let's take a quick trip down to Chelsea. Across from Margaret Thatcher's former home, there's some real Beatles history. The Sgt. Pepper cover was shot here in Michael Cooper's studio. I'd love to take you in there, but now it's just a studio apartment. But I'll put a link in the description with a lot of great photos from the shoot. Marilyn Monroe lookalike Diana Dors was one of the mannequins that was used on the cover. I find that hilarious because she literally lives around the corner as seen by her blue plaque. Feels like she could have just shown up. Now on to the third Marylebone site.
At the corner of Paddington and Baker Street stands a monument of the Beatles' hubris and susceptibility to mismanagement.
This was the location of the Apple Boutique clothing store. It was supposed to be a cool and chic shop with a unique psychedelic aesthetic, but what it turned into was a place marked by incompetent bookkeeping and uncontrolled shoplifting. The city council even made them paint over the signature mural with a dull white facade. The store was closed after only 10 months and lost over £2 million in today's money. The boutique was just one of many factors that led to the Beatles' inevitable breakup.
I haven't told you a George story yet, but there's a great one here at the original Hard Rock Cafe in Mayfair. Eric Clapton used to drink here regularly. Well, George, he preferred the Ritz, but they wouldn't let him in with his blue jeans. He would come down the street here and he would drink in Eric's bar. Well, as it turns out, when George came here, he would take Eric's favorite spot in the bar. Eric didn't want to have any of that, so he bribed the bartender with a guitar so that he could have that spot. Well, that guitar was the first piece of memorabilia that was ever collected by the Hard Rock. So I raise my glass to a petty squabble that created an empire.
There'll be more in Mayfair later, but let's take a quick trip down to St. James and Mason's Yard.
There's a lot of people who want to blame Yoko Ono here for breaking up the Beatles. Well, I'm here at Mason's Yard, and that argument wouldn't even exist if it wasn't for an event that happened here in 1966. This is number 6 Mason's Yard, and it's the former home of the Indicia Gallery. This is where John and Yoko met.
Was Yoko a factor in the breakup? Yes. Was she the reason? No. The Beatles, in fact, stayed together for a full 4 years after they met. One big reason for the downfall was after Sgt. Pepper, they were just too reliant on the studio to take their act on the road.
Just because the Beatles stopped touring doesn't mean they could stop promoting. That's why I'm here at St. Pancras Old Church.
The band hired wartime photographer Don McCullin to take promotional photographs for the White Album release. Old St. Pancras Church was one of the settings he chose for what was called the Beatles' Mad Day Out.
If you'd like to find or even replicate some of those shots, come to the churchyard. There's 3 spots that you should look for. This doorway, this fountain, and this bench.
You can't tell the story about the band without mentioning the 5th Beatle.
Behind me is Brian Epstein's apartment here in Belgravia, and in 1967, this is where he died of an accidental drug overdose. It cannot be understated how important Brian Epstein was to the success of the Beatles. Now, there's a lot of theories of what caused the demise of the Beatles, but I really think the major one was when they settled on Alan Klein as Epstein's replacement after Epstein died.
Epstein carefully curated the Beatles' career, look, and even stage presence. whereas the ruthless Klein only wanted to squeeze the last dollar out of the band. And that, with all the other building tensions, could only result in one outcome.
Well, we started our tour where it all began at Decca Records, and this is where it all ended. This is 3 Savile Road. This is where the Beatles' office, Apple Corps, was. And this is the rooftop where they played their final concert together.
This is where most Beatle tours end, but I want to go out on a happier note. This last site takes us right back to Brian Epstein's flat, where, as you can imagine, the lads spent a lot of time. Just turn down the alley next to his apartment, go down to the end of the street and take a right.
We've seen a lot of cool spots, but this is probably the best unknown Beatles spot in the whole city.
The horse and groom's proximity to Brian's flat, plus its amazingly hidden away location, made this the perfect place for even the 4 most famous people in the world to go have a drink in private. So stop in, enjoy the pictures on the wall, and tell all your friends that you had a couple pints where the Beatles hung out.
While the Beatles came here for privacy, I crave the attention, and I appreciate all the likes, subscribes, and shares. And why don't you leave a comment? Let me know if I missed any place. I read and respond to every one of them, and I appreciate all of you. Cheers.